the point is that the Democratic Party has become the party of millionaires, billionaires, celebrities, athletes, basically the upper echelon of society. You have people like Selena Gomez, which has been my favorite meme of this
It is
week.
my absolute favorite.
It gets better and better with every one that I see of her crying, not knowing what to do. And it's like, girl, you're worth $1 billion. Like, you could figure out what to do to help migrants if you really cared. And I think that's part of the joke of why people think it's so funny. But anyway, that's they're still going with it. They haven't really kind of learned their lesson, and DNC already in the new year electing. I don't even know who came out of the DNC chair elections. I don't think it matters. There was one video of them asking a question about, do you think Kamala lost because of racism and misogyny? Raise your hand, and everyone raised their hand. He's like, great, you all passed the first question. It's like, oh, okay.
Ouch. Okay.
So, but speaking of Democrats who are out of touch, I was inspired to add this section to today's episode because last night my wife and I enjoyed a beautiful evening at the San Diego Symphony. And if you don't know, the name of the San Diego Symphony is the Irwin and Joan Jacobs Music Center. Why is that really important? Because Irwin and Joan Jacobs, they are the grandparents of Sarah Jacobs, who is our congresswoman, one of our congresswomen down here in San Diego. Uh, Irwin Jacobs also is a co-founder of Qualcomm, one of the big businesses down here in San Diego, a multi-billion-dollar company that made them billionaires. She put out a video going over Trump's border policies and why they were wrong and what was wrong about them. And I watched it and said, we have to fact check this because this is just so bad on so many levels. So I'm going to pull up that video. And as it kind of goes along, we're going to stop and where is the video now? Oh boy. Now I don't have the video. Sweet.
So is Sarah, is she a Nepo baby as you're trying to find this video?
Is she a Nepo baby? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know what else she's done in her life, but it does make sense why they want her in Congress. We're going to get into that why it's beneficial to the Jacobs family and Qualcomm to have her in Congress. Wait until this video gets up. So I can't imagine what else she has done. She's been in Congress now since 2021, I think is when she first got in. So, all right, here we go. This is Sarah Jacobs explaining what she thinks is wrong with Trump's border policies. So let's dive in.
I'm Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, and I'm proud to represent the border community of San Diego. Let's clear up some common misconceptions. One, seeking asylum is legal under both domestic and international law. Now,
okay, first off, right off the bat, she's not wrong. Seeking asylum is legal under domestic and international law. However, if you go over and you look at usa.gov/asylum, who qualifies to get asylum in the United States? You have to be able to demonstrate that you were persecuted or have a fear of persecution in your home country due to race, religion, nationality, social group, or political opinion. Those are the categories. Wanting a better life or economic hardship are not reasons to seek asylum. So yes, it is legal. It is not legal for everything, though. So I guess she's claiming that everybody who comes across the border has a fair claim or a just claim for asylum, but we'll get into that in a little bit, whether or not that's actually true regarding the Remain in Mexico policy. But any thoughts on that before we keep going?
No, keep going.
Okay.
Now, what does that mean? It means that you have a legal right to come to a country that you feel is safe. And if you are fleeing political persecution, if you are afraid for your life, you can seek asylum. This law was actually put in place because when Jews were fleeing the Holocaust, countries wouldn't take them in. And that's where this international right to asylum came from. Two, asylum seekers are...
Okay. So again, asylum is legal. I don't know if every person who is coming and claiming asylum is on the level of Jews who are fleeing Germany, of that sort of persecution. That is quite the bold statement to make. Um, just going to say that. But again, I'm not disputing that it is a legal process. What we're going to talk about is whether or not that process is being abused.
Okay.
Asylum seekers are different than refugees who get processed in third countries and are different than people who are coming here and trying to just get a job or help in our economy. Asylum seeking is fleeing political persecution. Now that we've cleared that up, let's talk about what's actually happening at the border and what Donald Trump's executive orders would actually do. First, he's getting rid of the CBP-1 app. This is a tool that CBP, Customs and Border Protection, used to create a more orderly process for people who are coming to this country to seek asylum. It allowed people to make appointments so they didn't just have to show up, but they knew when to show up, and CBP knew that they would have the resources to process these people. So instead of this more orderly process, Donald Trump is getting rid of it, and that will create a less orderly process, the opposite of what we need. Second, the Remain in Mexico policy.
Okay, so CBP-1 app, as I understood it, allowed them to make appointments to seek asylum or apply for asylum as migrants, which you have to get into the United States. And basically, it kind of organized all the people who wanted to come and get into the United States. And that was the problem, was this assumption of like, you will get into the United States. And once you get here, you can claim asylum and get your papers and then just go about your way, which leads into the second point, which he's going to bring up about Remain in Mexico.
We saw before when the Remain in Mexico policy was instated, when you make people wait in Mexico, they are often more susceptible to the cartels, and it actually makes the situation a lot worse. 3, sending our troops to the southern border.
Okay, Remain in Mexico is a policy that was enacted to say, look, if you want to come here and seek asylum, again, going back to this whole asylum idea of you're here because you say you have a valid claim for asylum. That's why you want to come to America. And that's why you basically want to get into America is through this asylum claim. The idea of Remain in Mexico was you don't get to come to America and then say you're seeking asylum, and then you get a court date how many years in advance to determine whether or not you have a valid claim. The idea is, okay, you're saying you deserve asylum. Here's your paper. Here's when you can come back. But you can't come into the US right now because we can't determine whether you have a valid claim for asylum or not. Because before, it was the other way around. It was basically as long as you get to America and claim asylum, they basically give you some papers and say, okay, come back in 3 years. And then most of them never come back. So this is from the Federalist. And I thought this was interesting because this was a reporter who went down to the border on the Texas side, like Juarez. And he was talking to migrants down there around 2019 about Remain in Mexico. And he interviewed a couple of people. So one of the people he interviewed was this lady named Veronica. And she said she decided to journey over the American border with her 14-year-old daughter and 9-year-old son because she, quote, heard on the news that mothers and fathers who had kids were crossing into the United States, end quote. Such news of swift release is why migrants come. Quote, I was told the people from immigration control were going to find us and take care of us. And they were going to take our information and just let me go into the United States, Veronica said. Veronica was willing on that good news to lay down several $1,000s for smugglers to guide her family through the southern part of Mexico and then over the Rio Grande. But she slammed into the new American policy. This was back in 2019 with Remain in Mexico. Border Patrol escorted her and her kids back over the bridge to Juarez with paperwork showing she could come back for an initial immigration court hearing in 2 months. She knew it would be years before she could get a final judge's ruling. Suddenly, American asylum held no interest to Veronica. She wasn't getting to stay inside the United States to work, the point of the whole effort. Veronica told me she planned to toss the court papers in the trash and return to Honduras with the kids. Quote, if I knew before the things were going to be like this, I would have never left the country, she said. The reporter asked her and followed up and said, "Didn't you have to flee Honduras with your children or die?" She replied, "Not at all," she answered, a puzzled expression forming on her face. "I just want to go home and find a job in Honduras." Another person, apologies for this name, Geishani Reyes, a 22-year-old Honduran woman, was in the same shelter. When I met Reyes, she was upset over her remain in Mexico deportation 2 days earlier because her hearing date was 5 months hence. She said she reached her decision ahead for the Texas border after seeing half her town's families get in on false asylum claims. Quote, "Thousands left my town. The schools were empty. No kids, no parents. Everybody was saying I can cross with kids. I really thought I would make it in because so many people crossed and got a better life." She goes on to say, "I didn't expect this. I think these papers are a joke. They played with our sentiments, and all they did was gave us these papers. When I came here and saw this, I realized they just want to run us off." And then the reporter followed up again and said, "I asked her, wasn't Honduras supposed to be a government killing machine and rape trap, forcing young women like her to flee for their lives and honor?" She said she didn't see home like that at all. The only other place she wanted to live was the United States because of all the financial opportunities there, she said. And then a final one at a different shelter across town, Jose Luis Funes told me he and most of the 700 migrants at the shelter with him were going home instead of waiting out U.S. asylum claims that didn't get them into America. Their decision was based on the correct knowledge that the U.S. immigration judges almost never grant Hondurans asylum. Quote, "I'm not going to get asylum," he said, "the long wait ahead of him in Mexico, so I'm going back." Um, so again,
Wow.
that's a lot of people can say, well, that's just three people. Okay, but their argument is that everybody coming to the border is seeking asylum for some sort of better life.
Right.
Again, we've talked about how there's people who want to seek a better life. Perfectly fine. There is a process to go through for a better life here in the United States. Finding this asylum loophole is not one of them. You can't come here and just say, well, I want to get a job or I want better financial opportunities. That is not one of the ways you can get asylum. So to rebut what Sarah Jacobs is saying, basically she's saying, well, everybody who comes here seeking asylum, we have to let them in because they're seeking asylum. Well, you just saw from that not everybody's seeking asylum. And there's probably a good amount of people who are just seeking it because they want financial opportunities. And most of them, all of them even admitted that they weren't even scared in Honduras. There's nothing that they were fearing in Honduras. They weren't fearing for their lives. They weren't running from political persecution or violence or anything like that. So um, that's where I think she kind of drops the ball on that one about remain in Mexico because it makes it more chaotic. It makes it, I would say, less chaotic because instead of letting people in with the promise they'll show up years from now, you say, okay, when we get to your time, if you really think you need asylum here, you can show up and make your case. But until then, you're not just going to get free entry into the United States, and then when we need you to come show up for your court hearing, we have no idea where you are. Any
Right.
thoughts?
No, you explained it quite well. Thank you.
Okay.
Southern border. San Diego is a proud military community, and I serve on the House Armed Services Committee, so I spend a lot of time thinking about how and where we need to be using the U.S. military. There are lots and lots of threats all around the world. We do not need to be diverting our military's resources and focus from those threats to do the work of the Department of Homeland Security on our border. That is not the military's job. And lastly, designate.
Well, yeah, she thinks a lot about where military should go on the Armed Services Committee. She also thinks a lot about where the Department of Defense should spend their money. In Qualcomm as a technology company, if you go to usaspending.gov, let's see if I can find it. I had this all pulled up. Since she's been in office, one of the biggest contracts ever handed out during her time was for Qualcomm Intelligence Solutions, just for $15 million. This was a defensive contract handed out by the Department of Defense. Behind that, there was a $7 million contract, which was handed out during her tenure. a $3.4 million contract, another $2 million contract, another $1.6 million contract, $1.2 million contract, and the list goes on and on and on.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I'm sure she does think a lot about where the military should be. And I'm sure she thinks a lot about where the military can spend more money, which would mean her grandparents' business. So I'd love to. I didn't get a chance to look at her voting record on this specifically, but I would venture to say any bill that probably appropriated these contracts, I bet Sarah Jacobs voted yes on all of them.
I'm sure.
Which would be very informative information for, I think, her constituency to know that she is voting for the enrichment of her own family, which makes sense why they spent so much money to get her into Congress so she can be on the. I mean, look, coincidences don't happen. They don't get their granddaughter into Congress, and then she ends up on the Armed Services Committee, and then all of a sudden, the Department of Defense is handing out contracts to Qualcomm like they're candy. So I think she does think a lot about where the military should be and where they should be spending their money. Also, where are those other places, Sarah Jacobs? I want to know where you think those other places that we need to be sending our military is outside of protecting our own borders. I mean, is there any other place that is way more important right now in going on in history right now that is more important than protecting our own borders? I'd love to hear a response on that, because I don't, I can't fathom any place else we need to be sending our military other than protect our own country. Um,
Correct.
all right.
And this is pure speculation. I wouldn't be surprised if she's getting a kickback from helping make those contracts happen. I mean,
Oh,
my
yeah.
dad owns a business, and if I ever got him business, it's same with my sisters. If we like brought him business, he would give us a fee of like a finder's fee,
Hmm.
on a big fair. And so I wouldn't be surprised if somehow they're like, okay, you got us X amount of dollars, we'll float you personally. Like, well, your Christmas gift may be a little bigger this year.
Right. And I think it's enough of a laundering that the government contract gets handed out by Department of Defense. It goes to her grandparents' business. The business then sets up something to put it somewhere in some sort of trust or something. So then she gets it. So it doesn't seem like she's getting a direct kickback, but they're smart enough to probably stash a good amount of that money away for her. So if she ever does leave Congress, she has a nice little nest egg waiting for her. All right.
Right. Which in the private sector, I mean, I completely, again, like I just mentioned, a finder's fee. I see how that's totally fair. But this is coming, if this is, I mean, again, we're speculating that this is what is happening. But if it is, this is coming from like, it's the public. The public's involved here, and therefore we have a right to know.
Mm-hmm. So let's keep going.
Designating the cartels as a foreign terrorist organization. There's a few problems with this. The first is that it will make it much harder for nonprofit groups, who often are the ones helping immigrants and asylum seekers. It will make it harder for them to do their jobs because they will fear that by doing that, they'll be at risk of legal liability. The same thing that we've seen nonprofits have issues with when we designate organizations around the world as foreign terrorist organizations. But the second and more important, this is a military first approach to a problem that is inherently not a military problem. People are fleeing their countries because of bad governance, of corruption, lack of safety. And we've seen when we try and take a military first approach to these kinds of issues, like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, we can sometimes make the problem worse. And the last thing we need is in Afghanistan on our southern border. Now that I've told you why everything Donald Trump is trying to do is actually going to make things worse, you may be asking yourself what will make things better. In order to have a more orderly approach at our border, we need more legal pathways, not less, because legal pathways allow an orderly process and a process to be able to vet every person who is coming through that legal pathway. I've also been told that making it harder to seek asylum, making the threshold higher, actually wouldn't help Border Patrol at all. It would just mean they have to spend more time with each asylum seeker, taking them away from the parts of their job we need them to be doing, like securing the border. So we need more case officers. We need more people who can more quickly adjudicate these asylum cases. And lastly, We need to focus on the root causes and the reasons that people are fleeing their countries and migrating to the United States. And that means more assistance to some of these countries. And that means really focusing on governance and corruption issues. Donald Trump does not understand the border. And what he's doing is actually going to make the situation more chaotic. I, a representative of a border community, will keep pushing back on this chaos and keep working towards a common sense solution where we can have an order.
So,
Okay.
did she just say the government involvement in Afghanistan was a mess, but we need government involvement in these countries? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we need more government involvement in this mess, but less in Afghanistan. Um, and
Well, not,
also,
I don't even want to like, it's not even specific to the countries. It's just saying she just flat out said our government involvement in other countries caused more of a mess. We need more government involvement in other countries to clean up their messes. Like, what?
and also her. This is something I've been saying on the interwebs to people about migration and illegal immigration during the debate. It is, yes, it's still a law in the books, and we've brought this up. I would love a better life as well. I would like to be $1 million richer. However, I can't go rob a bank and say I want a better life, so therefore give me $1 million. That's not how it works. There's laws on the books.
There's a $6.4 million home for sale right now, kind of near me, that I really, really want.
I think you should
Really
steal
want.
it because you want a better life.
I want it would provide a better family functional space for my family.
You want a better life, so therefore
I
you
want
can
it.
steal it.
I want it.
There are laws on the books, and we can debate whether the immigration system in America is all screwed up, and there's tons of red tape, and it is hard to become a citizen here. But that is then a question for your representatives to fix. Is as question someone in Congress, Sarah Jacobs, can propose a bill. She doesn't have to be sitting here doing TikTok videos. She can propose a bill where she says, I'm going to fix the immigration crisis because I'm on the border and therefore I have ideas on how we're going to fix this and overhaul immigration. Maybe work with President Trump to say, I want to work with you to fix immigration. Instead, she chose to film a TikTok video. But her whole, well, we need more legal pathways rather than just allow everyone in through asylum kind of contradicts the fact that she was fine with letting everyone come in under asylum. She's fine with letting everybody come in because the law is unjust, but she also admits that we need more legal pathways,
Mhm.
which is she admitting that the pathways they're taking are not legal to get into the country. Also, designating the cartels as terrorist organizations, she thinks it's not. That's a wrong approach with the military to deem them as a terrorist organization. I think if you asked a lot of people in those countries whether or not the military should be taking on the cartel, they might be agreeing with you. I'm not sure how you take on the cartels in any other matter. I know that there's a new slogan that the Mexican president is saying, like hugs, not bullets, or hugs, not shooting, with when it comes to cartels. See how that works. Let's go hug your local cartel member. That maybe that'll stop the cartel violence. Um, but also she brings up the idea of NGOs. It makes it harder for NGOs to like work with these cartels or work in these countries, which has been a cause of concern. I looked this up last night. This is actually just published the other day on New York Post. Our brand new Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, she has stopped all taxpayer money from funding illegal migrants from coming over. This is based on the fact that there are 15 UN agencies and 230 NGOs. They were proposing to get another $1.4 billion and $1.2 billion in 2026. And that's in addition to more than $6 billion from 2020 to 2024 that these NGOs and UN's organizations were getting to help fund mass migration into the United States. So I guess she's mad that those NGOs can't continue to get money anymore or taxpayer
It
money. So,
sounds like it.
um, but
Which we know
again,
how those work anyway. It's the board that actually gets most of the money.
right.
Their board members, their presidents rake in $1 million annual salaries while they
There was
allegedly are helping these problems.
there was one that I was reading. I saw. Oh, I can't find it now. It was like Refuge. Was the name of the NGO Refuge.org or something, and the CEO makes like $500,000 a year, and her whole thing is helping migrants. I don't know,
That is
five
how
hundred.
I can get my $6.4 million dream home.
Go be the CEO of a nonprofit. Go be the CEO of a homeless nonprofit here in California. That seems to
Yeah.
work pretty well.
Or
Seem
work
to
for
make good
the
money.
LA Water and Power District.
Or the LA Department of Water and Power. They do pretty well as well. So yeah, Sarah Jacobs records a TikTok, thinks she owns Donald Trump and the border policies, gets a lot of it wrong, misconstrues a lot of the policies, but not surprising. She wants to defend the military going other places, keep those contracts rolling, keep those fat, government contracts rolling to Qualcomm,
What's to fund the military going into not Afghanistan, but going into other countries to
but
solve
not
their
but
problems?
not South America. Don't go into those countries.
Okay.
So just to be clear, she
I
wants it.
I will say I appreciate though that she didn't do the whole cringe like angry woman yelling and like saying a bunch of like, which was probably a smart approach because people are more likely to listen to her because she sits there and sounds like she's like saying factual information, and so people are like, oh wow, okay, good points, good points. But I appreciate that she actually acted in a very professional manner versus AOC doing the now Selena Gomez like crying breakdown.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
yeah, I'll give her that she's actually trying to put out what she thinks are informative, but she's trying to boil down what is a complicated issue into a 4-minute video on TikTok. uh it's not that easy. So props to her for the way she presented it, not props to her for the information that she presented. So